Okay, thank you and welcome everyone to our monthly call of the for Community-Led Development. As I was just saying, this is one of the most important issues I consider in all the world of community-led development, and that is how can we shift money into grassroots women's organizations? As you may have noticed in the paper, uh, that we circulated by Francois, that less than 2% of the gender-focused money makes it to grassroots women's organization. And that is an egregious crime against humanity. That has got to transform. And we're really delighted to have you today. Sarah, can you please explain interpretation for our Francophone guests?
Sure. Pour nos collègues francophones, nous avons un traducteur français, Dr. Paul, et vous trouverez le bouton d'interprétation en bas de votre écran à droite.
Okay, and there are also captions. Sarah, can you turn on captions? So there are captions in many languages that you can choose, and we want to make this as inclusive possible. And as you see from Edward is providing sign language for those who need it. So thank you all for joining us today. So for those of you new to the movement for community-led development, we were launched alongside the Sustainable Development Goals Summit in 2015, because we recognize that development is local. And now the UN has recognized, as of just last year, that 65% of the targets for the Sustainable Development Goals can only be achieved in communities. And yet communities, for the most part, lack the resources, the autonomy, the coordination, the relationships that they need to be successful at that. So we are a global network of networks of national associations, more than 2,000 local civil society groups, and a couple of dozen international NGOs are part of this network. And we all share this commitment to shifting power in terms of resources and autonomy to local communities. We have 5 goals. The first is voice and agency for women, youth, people with disabilities, marginalized groups. Second is adequate community finance. We believe at least 20% of the national budget of countries should be in the hands of local communities. That's not true for most of the world. And that there should be mechanisms for community-based organizations to be funded. And that's, of course, the topic for today. The third is good local governance, a system of transparency and accountability and democratic decision-making that includes the voices of everyone in the community. Fourth, quality public services. When communities achieve those first 3 things, they usually can make sure that they have access to schools and health clinics and other key public services that are a fundamental and universal human right. Finally, resilience. Community leaders are always the first responders. So they need to have the resources, the training, everything they need to make sure their communities are resilient to all shocks. So as you see on the map, we have these national associations that are in various forms of building themselves up so that they can actually mobilize collective action and collective voice for advocacy in their own countries. This is a list of kind of how it's going. We have 7 national associations that are duly legally registered. We have another half a dozen that are underway, and then many more that are in the process of mobilization and or where individual organizations are participating. So it's quite a lot of us, and more are welcome. You can find out how to register your country on our mcld.org website. So our special guest today that you'll hear from in a moment are Celine Carrere, who is a real expert in peace building, in conflict mitigation, and preventing violence. And she has successfully been able to mobilize resources. And Beatrice Boakye-Udom, who is grants manager at one of the most pioneering African organizations, the African Women Development Fund. And so we'll be discussing them. And could I just ask everybody who's not the speaker, and maybe Sarah, maybe you and Steve could help mute people because we're getting some echo. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop sharing the slides for now, and then I'm going to spotlight Beatrice. And let's see, add spotlight. And I'm going to spotlight Celine. Let's see. Stage managing these calls is really something. Oh my gosh, as people join, it moves all the participants around. So add spotlight. Okay, there we are. So welcome, Celine and Beatrice. We're so happy that you could join us today. And we also will hear a little bit later from a respondent from the gender group at USAID on how USAID can advance this goal of really shifting money into the hands of grassroots women's organizations. So I want to start with our two speakers. And Beatrice, if you could unmute, we would love to hear just what was your journey that brought you here? Take a few minutes just to tell us your journey that led you to your position with the African Women's Development Foundation.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Good afternoon from Ghana. My name is Beatrice, and I work with the African Women's Development Fund, like John rightly said. And so I really didn't have an aha moment. However, I am a church girl. I grew up in the church. And from my childhood, I really did recognize the differential treatment between men and women within the church. But I really couldn't articulate it. I couldn't pinpoint what it was. However, with time, as I grew, I came to understand, the patriarchal system in which we lived and how women were treated differently from men. After school, I had the opportunity of working with ADRA, which is an international NGO. And I led a huge HIV/AIDS project in the city of Accra, working with informal traders, mainly women. And that was actually where my journey began. And so we were mobilizing and educating women long-distance traders, market women, women apprentices, fisher folks, diverse groups of women within the communities. And that was when I really did understand how women were treated as against men and how the systems and the structures within the communities did impinge on the rights of women. And so from there, I moved on to the African Women's Development Fund to manage an HIV/AIDS project. And that was mainly around funding women's rights organizations, building spaces for them, building institutional development, and ensuring that women's rights organizations were well-resourced to play that critical role that they play within the organization. And after a while, being at AWDF, I'm now the programs manager resourcing, where at AWDF, we make a conscious effort to ensure that small women's rights organizations are resourced knowing very well the role that they play within the gender justice ecosystem and generally within the development ecosystem. So that is how I came to be here.
That's your journey to here. Okay, thank you. And Celine, what has your journey been to get you here?
Thank you so much, John. And yeah, I'm Celine Courage. I'm a founding member of one of the women-led movement, grassroots women's movement called Rural Women Peace Link. Rural Women Peace Link, of course, started as informally in 1994, and then 1999, we had a registration as a CBO, community-based organization. And then in the year 2011, it gained its legal registration as an NGO. Now, the formation of Rural Women Peace Link started in more of a humanitarian context. So, in 1992, Kenya experienced some ethnic violence, and so NCCK, National Council of Churches of Kenya, was responding, and I got to work with the National Council of Churches of Kenya then. And most of my work involved going around the country. And as I went around the country, I realized that those women who are in the IDP camps, internally displaced camps, and those women who are in the communities were completely left out of everything. And so one of the issues that disturbed me was, why are these women quiet? So much that even when you're asking them what is the problem that they were experiencing as women within conflict context, they were not able to say anything. They would just say, as men have said. And so that really helped, pushed me into going around the places that were affected with some reasons. And one of them was to mobilize and organize these women so that at least they could be involved in the rebuilding of the society. But also that we could also listen to these women to understand what exactly do they want, as opposed to assuming that we knew what they wanted. And so these women told us a lot of stories, including what they wanted to be, what they wanted peace, they wanted their children to go to education, they wanted opportunity to trade again with one another. And then we thought that it was important. So I formed a dream team that went around to build structures, identifying the self-help groups that were already existing, and to be able to give them the space to speak, but also give them an agenda of peace and security to be able to look at it during their self-help group meetings. And that was my journey. And the Rural Women Peace Link is now an NGO that has really broken barriers.
Okay, well, I love the concept of a dream team. So how did you come up with that name for the team that was going around?
It was really a consensus among the women. One, we realized that the situation was a little bit hostile. The environment was quite difficult. And so the dream team was, who are these who are going to be, to kind of conceptualize some good ideas and take to the women in the communities. And so the whole idea of dream team came like, okay, we are dreaming of a huge network that would bring all these women from rural areas and from conflict-affected areas to find a common ground and understand that they can actually work as a bridge other than get themselves divided on ethnic line and political affiliation divides. So it was 5 women and then 2 men. And these 2 men were strategically involved because they had the influence. We kept on asking ourselves as women, what exactly do we have in our hands that can open opportunities for us as women to engage? And we realized that the women belong to churches, the women belonged to chamas, the self-help groups, the women belonged to, the women had opportunity as they took their children to school, the women had opportunity in the marketplaces, and and so we made sure that all those spaces, the dream team conceptualize what this would look like, so that if you are a woman trading in a market, then you would commit to be sharing the whole concept of peace and reconciliation within the market place. But then if you belong to a church, so we would commit that you would have to share the objective and the ideas of the Rural Women Peace Link within the church, because the church have opportunities for women conferences annually. The church have the youth conferences. The church had the opportunity. We didn't have money, and so the church had those opportunities. And so the women, the dream team would ensure that we reach out to the women to really talk with them and tell them, you know, you have opportunity in your church. Can you go and tell the organizers of a youth conference or a women conference, which will take place in a year, to be able to invite one of us? So the dream team was really there to do all the groundworks and to be available all the time, and even to contribute some of the resources.
Wow, that's fabulous. Thank you. You know, as you were speaking, I'm reminded of one of my mentors who said, you know, you go to the people, listen to them, build on what they know, start with what they have. And what you were describing is a perfect example of that. Now, Françoise Girard's point in her paper was that grassroots women's organizations are not only going to have this impact for positioning women to get what their rights are, but it's also a place to really transform the kind of gender injustice that affects all of our societies, whether it's Asia, Africa, North America. Patriarchal discrimination against women and girls continues to be everywhere. So I just want to ask Beatrice, how have you seen grassroots women's organizations as being really vital to transforming those conditions, transforming the norms, the laws, the social conditions that generate this kind of injustice?
Thank you very much, John. And so as the paper you're talking about said, grassroots women are very, very important when it comes to building solidarity, when it comes to building community, when it comes to building collective power. All these are very, very important if we are to have long-term sustainable change within our communities. These grassroots organizations have been over the years sowing seeds of transformation within their communities. They live within the communities and therefore know the community needs best. And they also know best what solutions will be able to help in that transformation process, be it in a resource-rich or resource-poor context. The grassroots women who live within that community are best placed to do that. Again, grassroots communities, they have better links and connections within the community. And so to be able to garner community ownership, to be able to garner support from the community, you need somebody who knows the community better, who is related to the community, who's aligned to the community, who can bring the community together for us to get the needed transformation that we need. Again, as we all know, a bottom-up approach is always better than, you know, somebody coming in from the top and deciding what to be do or how to do it. And these grassroots organizations are within the community there. And therefore, all their processes, all their conversations involve the community. And therefore, it's the community who offer the solutions to, you know, whatever issues they are going through. I also want to say that grassroots communities, the conversations that they have around, be it customary law, be it tradition, be it practices within their communities, are as important as those huge policy, so-called huge policy advocacies that are held at the, you know, global level or the national level. And so when you look at all these things, it's so germane that grassroots organizations are funded so that they are better able to maximize their effort to ensure the transformation that we all are working towards.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you. Celine, I know as I've visited different communities, I've noticed that rural communities in particular are like these mini cultures that there could be real transformation in attitudes and behaviors that are quite progressive in a relatively short amount of time. And I'm just wondering what you've seen on the same question, Celine, how grassroots women organizations have been able to really catalyze a change in the conditions for women in their local communities.
Thanks, John. I think just to add my voice on what Beatrice has said, that by the virtue that the women are women themselves, they have a deeper understanding of those gender injustices that we are talking about, and the impact it has on the community. So their intervention are usually informed by their real experiences, whether it's socially, economically, and politically. Beatrice already mentioned that the grassroots women operate at the community level, as I noted, of course, which means that they have significant advantage of local context. And then, of course, local knowledge, which is very critical when it comes to looking for really sustainable solution. Now, this allows these women to really apply kind of localized and community-driven approach. And many times, taking our example, we did a lot of tailor-made interventions. Now, through the community-based advocacy, you find that the women, the grassroots women can push for change in policy and institutional kind of reforms. And I want to give an example of one policy that Rural Women Peace Link, together with other community-based women-led organizations did. We have, in Kenya, we have Sexual Offense Act 2006. Now, when that is it was by Justice Njoki Ndung'u. Now, when the bill on sexual offense bill was being presented in Parliament in 2006, actually it was 2005, the first reading in Parliament, it failed. Then the grassroots women grassroots movement organizations across Kenya spoke with one another. We spoke with one another and we asked, how can we help this bill to be passed? And we agreed that every woman that is at the community level was going to engage with their members of parliament. And we designed a message. And one message that was like, if you don't pass that bill, then we will not give you our votes. And you can imagine that message was being sent through SMS, short message text to the members of parliament, and they were all reading the same. So whenever they were sitting, if the members of parliament were sitting together, they would read messages and it's like, oh, I'm also getting the same message. And it really worked so much so that in the second reading, the bill passed. And today we are proudly saying in Kenya that we have a Sexual Offense Act 2006.
Wow.
I think women in the community also focus on more on a better tomorrow rather than today, you know. So allow me to read a quotation here from the UN Women that proves what I've just saying. It's saying, every day we seek to make the world a better place for all people without discrimination, with equality and respect. This is a statement made by a lady called Marta Vieira da Silva, UN Women Goodwill Ambassador. And that is this is what we have experienced, that when it comes to women-led organizations, they do not just think about today. They're thinking about what will happen to my children and my children's children. And so they work with a lot of passion and with a lot of commitment. And they ensure that whatever foundation we are putting is sustainable.
Wow. That's so true and so important. And it's, you know, it redoubles the injustice of these groups not being able to access funding. That's really my next question in this kind of very neo-colonial patriarchal aid system that we're struggling to transform. What are some of the barriers the grassroots women's organizations face in getting funding? Beatrice, probably a lot of them come to you. And what are you hearing from them, the barriers that they face in being able to meet their core operating expenses, even just, bus fare to get to the next community?
Thank you. And so for many of the grassroots women's rights organizations, I think that accessibility is a key issue. Even being able to know that there is an opportunity here is an issue, because they don't get to, many of them are not as agile on social media as you get your ordinary young women-led organization or something. Many of them might not be in the spaces where these opportunities come to bear, etc. And so accessibility is one key issue. Even knowing where to go to is one key issue. The other issue has to do with the application processes. For many of these application processes, it somehow automatically denies these very important organizations the opportunity to apply. And so either the application processes are complex, or the things that are being requested of these processes are things that some of these organizations cannot provide. For example, if you are asked for a 3-year audit, for example, it becomes very challenging for many grassroots community organizations. There are also issues around what the donor is looking for and what the reality of the community organization is. And so a donor organization might be asking for applications for A, B, or C. And meanwhile, that is not the real needs of the community organizations. And so these things sometimes, creates a barrier in them getting application. But I think that one key issue is mistrust. I think that donors simply are not trusting women's rights organizations, community women's rights organizations, enough to be able to invest in them. They don't think that they, as part of the patriarchal systems, the patriarchal upbringing, et cetera, they kind of don't trust giving their monies to small women's rights organizations because they don't have the financial system that they are looking for, or whatever it is. And so for me, I think that's one key issue is around mistrust.
Wow. Thank you, Beatrice. Celine, you've been on the other side of this looking for money for your work. What kind of barriers have you faced?
Yeah, John, I'm telling you, that is it is when it comes to looking for money, it's always a real frustration, and I'm sure many of the those in the call would agree with that. But I think one of the things that I experienced was the perception informed by a kind of concept of masculinity and gender bias, where perception that men think smarter than men and that they can actually be more transparent and they can be more accountable to the resources that are put. And then the kind of stereotypes that assumes that women don't have the capabilities to manage. And of course, so these things can really, this kind of perception really influence the decision-making by the donors. But I also experienced that there's unclear investment in women's alignment initiatives. Their priorities are normally directed to projects that align with traditional gender roles or male-dominated sectors. And so there are more money for male-dominated sectors than women organizations. Beatrice has already mentioned, I think, strict donor requirements. That was one of the that was one of the greatest challenge that we actually encountered when we during our formation stage, where you are doing the greatest job and the heaviest than even the other organizations somewhere else. But because the donor requirements are so strict, you are not able to meet that. One, they need you to have an audited report of up to almost 5 years that time. And it's like, we have just started. Where do we get the experience of 5 years with funding an audited financial report? And so they kind of those restrictions really make it difficult. And then yeah, so I think I want to say that, but lack of access to information. Our case as Women Peace Link, we started at a point when even the internet was not accessible, and you had to really get to post office, then to look at their big book to try to see which organizations are actually funding have some money that can be labeled as donors. And so adequate information for us on available funding opportunities was a real issue when it comes to us as women-led organizations that are grassroots.
Wow. We had a call yesterday on one of the things that came up was actions that these grassroots organizations can take to overcome these barriers. So I know you both have seen when your own organizations or other women's organizations find a way around these barriers. So if you were each to recommend sort of 3 things that, say, the people on this call could do to overcome those barriers. Beatrice, what would you say would be 3 ways that existing grassroots organizations can overcome these barriers?
I think that advocacy, raising our voice and making our voice and needs known is very important. I think that we shouldn't give up. We should continue to raise our voices. We should continue to be on platforms and other spaces where we can speak about our needs and what we are doing. It's one key thing that we can do. I think that as women, community women's rights organization, I think that we should also do documentation. I think that we should document our work and use it to articulate our vision and what we are capable of doing, what we have done in the past. Let's tell our stories. And as people continue to hear our stories, they would continue to reflect and give us the opportunities that we need. I think that one other thing that we can do is to build relationships. I think that relationship building is a very, very important resource. And so as community organizations, let's continue to build relationships with diverse stakeholders. Let's sustain those relationships and let's use those relationships to talk about, the need to fund women's rights organizations. And in doing that, we should also think about collaborating with like-minded organizations. And I think that these will be some of the ways by which we can raise our visibility and ensure that funders are listening and are making it accessible for us to get funding.
Great. So in many cases, Beatrice, you're kind of sitting in the middle, coaching women, getting their stories and passing them on so that AWDF can get the money to give to them, yes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very, very important. It's very, very important for us to tell our stories. It's very, very important for us to show off our knowledge. Many a times, women's knowledge are underrepresented, but women are very, very knowledgeable, especially within their context. They know better, and therefore it's important for us to raise these issues and for women to be acknowledged and recognized for that we do.
I was with a community organizer a few nights ago, and they said that people, particularly who are in very low income communities or have had really rough lives, they have a lived experience that nobody else has, you know, and that they need to own their narrative, because that's a powerful tool. And so your comments about that are really apropos. Celine, what have you seen are 3 ways that you or other women groups that you know of have overcome the kind of the
John,
prevailing?
I think I want to underscore on that, building strong networks and partnership, because for us that was really a process that really helped us. Rural and PeaceLink, when we began, it's a network. So we began networking right from the villages to the district level to the national level. And so then we started again networking with international, with regional organizations like ISIS, WIKE, I'm sure you could be knowing. Which gave us a big platform of interacting again with different women-led organizations from different countries in Africa. But then also we moved further to start strengthening the linkages and networks at international level. Now we got the opportunities to share our story that is being mentioned here. And in the process of sharing our stories, we started getting donors, people who had funds, getting interested. And so that is very, very important. Demonstrate impact. You really demonstrate it, because anytime a donor comes, it's like, so what have you been able to do? And there should be impact that are scalable at the same time. Investing in setting up functional systems and structures is very key. One of the questions that we encountered is financial reporting. How are our procurement systems look like? The donors want to know where their money is going and that their money is invested and can be accounted for. And so it is very important that we invest in setting up functional systems and structures, especially on financial management system and procurement system. But I would really also just encourage everyone, and especially those ones who are starting, to continue doing what you are passionate about doing, without necessarily thinking so much about money, because along the way, your engagement is going to be visible through the networks.
Really good point. Really good point, because people are, every day, women in almost every community are having an impact. They're having an impact on the school, on the health clinic, on the farms and the markets. And to be able to claim that and assert it and make it known, and then hopefully the money will follow. I wanted to, so that we have a lot on this call, dozens of women running grassroots organizations or working for grassroots organizations. So I'd just like to see if any of the women community leaders on this call would like to raise their hands and ask a question or make a contribution to this conversation. So I see a lot of, and if you don't volunteer, I will call on you, because some of you are so awesome. I know you. Who would like to ask which woman community leaders on this call would like to ask a question or raise an issue?
First,
Yes. Who's that? Go ahead.
this is Chongsin. I am Chongsin Koireng, from Manipur, one of the northeastern state of India, and
Yes.
I work for the indigenous. I work for indigenous women and indigenous persons with disability, and including indigenous women with disability. And I myself is also a low vision disability woman. So I work. My focus is mainly on business, persons with disabilities, as well as indigenous women with disabilities. In my experience of working, begin from local level to the national, to the international level. inclusion of with disabilities in work or organization from the national to global level. The participation of indigenous is still invisible, is very low. So how can we develop?
So the question is, when their visibility is really low, like her situation in Manipur with women with disabilities, how can she raise their visibility? Any suggestions, Beatrice or Celine?
Okay, I'm so sorry. My name is Go. But then
Yeah, sorry, your sound is breaking up. So any?
Yeah,
Any-
I think from John, what you have just said, I've talked about visibility, and what Walde is talking about. I'm very familiar with it because I did some research on Dalit issues, and but I'm also really very inspired by the Indian women human rights that are really fighting against all these biases. When visibility is low, I think for me in our side, from my experience, is increasing in the network, participate and collaborate, right from with the government structures, participate with other women, community groups, participate with those large organizations that have been funded, participate in campaigns, do some big campaign. For us, honestly, I think one activity or one strategy that gave us blew all our image was really engaging and organizing a campaign during International Women's Day, and which was very good because we got all the organizations, grassroots organizations. We invited other organizations from the national level, and we also invited some people from representations from the embassies, even though they didn't fund us, but we wanted them to be there. That time, Urgent Action Fund Africa, the office was based in Nairobi. I hope it's still there. And so amplifying what we do through these internationally recognized recognized days, recognized campaigns would boost your visibility.
Great point, Celine. Paulina, I see your hand up. What do you want to say?
I'm Paulina from the Philippines. My question is, how do we cope? How do grassroots women organizations cope with the standards of funding agencies when the support that are provided is very limited? So the support is being provided for direct project funds, and there is very little, or if not at all, there's no funds for capacity building in terms of organizational strengthening that would make the operations of the organization sustainable.
Yeah, great question. How do you raise enough money to accept money? It's a terrible problem. Beatrice, what have you seen with your grantees? How do they meet things beyond project funding?
It's a huge issue. I think that we all do know that project funding don't work. It's not sustainable. It does not build resilience. It does not allow the women's rights organization and all other organizations to build the infrastructure and the resilience that is needed for maximum impact. And it's for that reason that many women's funds, such as the African Women's Development Fund, have over the years been consistently advocating for long-term flexible funding, core funding that comes with some type of accompaniment that helps to build the infrastructure and the resilience of organizations. many donors think that women's rights organizations, especially the human resource in them, should not be paid because they are used to unpaid care work. They think that when a women's rights organization or women in women's rights organizations should not be paid, and so they give you project money with very, very little money, to build infrastructure and to pay your staff, etc., etc. And so advocacy for me continues to be a key issue. I think that as women's rights activists, as feminist activists, we should continue to advocate for that flexible long-term funding that allows us to build a kind of infrastructure that will push forward gender justice.
And Beatrice, when you work with your grantees, what kind of long-term commitment or process do you set up with them? How does that work?
Okay, so at AWDF, I want to put it out that we don't have independent funding. Most of our funding are from the bilaterals. And so at AWDF, we ourselves are a little handicapped. However, we always have been ingenious around how we use those resources. And so our longest grant is usually 3 years. And organizations are allowed to come to us a number of times. So you can always apply to AWDF after the 3 years or after the 2 years for more funding. When we fund, we allow you to use 50% of your money flexibly to do whatever you want to do. And for some of our funding, in addition, we give you, for our Leading from the South funding, we give you, I think, 9,000 a year. So if it's 3 years, 27,000, just for institutional development or however you want to use it, in addition to the 50% that you can use flexibly. And so we are finding ingenious ways around how we can ensure that we provide that flexible funding that women's rights organizations need to be able to push the agenda forward.
Wow. Beatrice, that's phenomenal, 50%. Now I see a lot of our brothers are raising their hands. They want to speak, but I just want to see first, because there are a lot of women leaders on this call, and I don't want to deny them of their voice. So who among the females among us has another comment to say before I call on my brothers here? Anyone? Okay, Edward, I'll turn to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Edward, Director for One Family in Sierra Leone. It is a literary focused organization. And thank you, Beatrice and Selena, for your presentation. I think it's the same thing all over. But for us over here, also, one thing I want to ask you a question is regarding that the participation of speech and hearing impaired women, like they are called the deaf women, the visually impaired also. And me and it's an uphill task to get them together and get them to access funding, unless you bring them all together. I want to know, how are you working with them? Like for us over here, I mean, when you look at them, they are regarded as people that have double disability because of the discrimination, even among the men also, to give them a chance to access funding. And it's kind of difficult sometimes for donors to really believe in them. Like you said, the capacity building, coaching and mentoring goes a very long way. Building up their capacity, strengthening them, making sure they have the right system. That's the only way I believe we can be able to get, donors to believe in them. And like you said, some of the funding, they're about 2-3 years. It's not really enough to go a long way. When you understand that the women with disability in the city, they're finding it very compared to the one even in the provinces. It's a very, very, very big tax to date. But I believe the United Nations have a very big role to play. Also, when it comes to the SDG 20 agenda, leave no one behind, because engaging them also to get more research done to really know what is going on in the life of these women is very, very important, because they're really, really being left behind globally. What I see. But to us, our partner, Learning Foundation in Netherlands, their support has been about making sure these women, they are grouped into different enterprises. Look for programs for them. In the sense that they then set up programs whereby they are in 5 person in a group, and they can start some businesses so they can be independent. Independence is the most important thing because most of the time, if they don't have a job, the men, they come over and they get them pregnant. That's what we call the night wives. There's a research that was done with the UK government and the Dutch government. The men, they come in the night, they sleep with these women, and in the morning they deny them. And when they get pregnant, you're saying there's no evidence, there's no DNA test. So these women, they continue to carry, this burden, and for them to participate in society becomes very, very difficult. So I want to ask you, how are you coping on your side? Thank you very much.
Good question. Good question, Edward. That's got to be one of the most horrific crimes against humanity that you just laid out. What, Celine, Beatrice, I know you both have worked with women with disabilities. What have you seen?
Let me go first then. I think, thank you very much for the question. And I think I want to appreciate that the donors, whether they are funding the big, larger organizations or small organizations, are very keen on ensuring the inclusivity. And that really, when that becomes part of the donor requirement, then definitely the problem, the challenge that you're talking about is being resolved. We emphasize a lot on gender, on data disaggregation, where we have to be sure that even in a meeting, we ask how are the people with disability represented. In our policy, we have policies, and we encourage other organizations to ensure that they have a gender policy and a policy on that ensures that there is inclusivity. The only challenge that comes with this is the additional expenses that need to be understood by the donors, that as we engage in the community with people with disabilities, there are additional funds, additional expenses. For example, the sign language that we are just having right here, you have to get them. You have to hire people who are going to actually help the people with disability to understand. If we have materials that we have to translate, for example, people with visual challenges, then we need to translate them to have some brails, and so those are really is still a challenge, but I think we're really making headway in terms of, one, awareness, but also in terms of ensuring that they are included, and when it comes to participation, they are able to participate, but also by just giving them their own space. Rural Women Peace League, we began by giving rural women especially, who never went to school, their own space for them to start speaking, because each time you included them in the larger groups, they would keep quiet. So we have also seen the sense and the advantage of ensuring that they have their own space, but that in the budget, their needs are also captured in the budget. And I think that is something that we continue to keep learning, but inclusivity has already been captured very well.
Very good, Celine. Thank you. So, Kabede, you have your hand up. What do you want to ask?
I'm not actually to ask questions, but I wanted to share our experience as a small NGO. In our case, we don't have a separate budget for mobilizing, organizing women, but from the project, from livelihood project, then we had to organize, self-help groups. We have something like 12 active self-help groups. And these ones, what we did was we just provided them seed money, and then they started, saving and credit practices. So with that saving and credit practices, so they were able, to provide services or to provide to their children, you know, school materials and other things. And they have become also, you know, having access to and control over resources. Then they discuss with their husbands. Of course, training has been given to husbands and women as well. So otherwise, you know, these harmful traditional practices, you know, in the rural areas still exist, but this has to be, you know, controlled, you know, through training and having projects, different projects. But the thing is that the donor base is very limited. So, you know, we are planning now this next year to connect them to the district. They're at sub-district level to the district women association so that they get strengthened and become free, you know, in their activities. I just
you've
wanted
really
to share. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's really both Beatrice and Celine have really emphasized that the power of that building those networks and strengthening them. Thank you. That's great. Melanie, let me hear from you, Melanie Chirwa.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melanie, and I'm from Zambia. I work with People's Process on Housing and Poverty in Zambia, and at a global level, part of a network called Slum Dwellers International. So we work mostly with people living in slums or informal settlements, and our work resonates with what many of the people on the group have been talking about. And it involves women organizing and starting with their own savings, because we believe that the resources of women and the resources of poor themselves are key and important to their own development process. And they should not be seen as just mere beneficiaries of development, but they need to take hold of their own development process. We also believe in collecting data, and the data that is collected by the people themselves. And yes, they do get support from our organization as their support NGO, and we work in partnership with the local authorities, with government, so that we can co-create solutions. And we've also been looking at issues of like precedent setting. So in terms of building houses and implementing service delivery, but doing it from a point where the community members are in the lead. And we find that when community members take the lead, instead of looking at maybe getting contractors, these big contractors, and making projects more expensive, but when it's taken up by the community at a local level, and local artisans are empowered, the projects become cheaper. So we can also demonstrate to governments that there is a different way in which we are able to work. And then on issues of advocacy, it has been where some agencies don't want to meet with the community. They say, no, you come and represent them. And we're like, no, we community members can represent themselves. They can speak on their own behalf. So we have had to push and push until they've been recognized and being part of influencing policy and practice. I just wanted to share that, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And congratulations. That's great. Celine, Beatrice, any comments you make on Melanie's example of really starting with savings? Because I know that's a big tradition across particularly West Africa, but lots of places.
Hello.
I like what she has just said, that women are not just beneficiaries, you know. And this is why we are saying let us support women-led organizations. in Kenya, we have what we call table banking, and it starts right from the self-help groups that I mentioned earlier when it came to the formation of Rural Women Peace Link, where we already have women well organized in the villages. And in these villages, one of their agenda, most of their, the biggest agenda that they have is collecting money or contributing little monies that can help them to buy cups and plates, some these household things, little household things. But that is how we plugged into this existing self-help groups to start to give them the additional agenda on peace and security, because it's a conflict context. And we are saying you are always meeting to talk about cups. Why don't you also start with trying to just to assess the context, the conflict context? What was it like in the last 2 weeks in terms of peace and security? What are all those? And then help them join them in training to see how they can report all those to the authorities for response. So yes, I think the Zambian example is a great one. And I know I've engaged with many Zambian women-led organizations. They're just excellent. And when it comes to investment, I think a lot of Zambian women-led organizations took steps to invest in infrastructures that actually earn them income. So, yeah.
Great. Okay, there's a few more people I want to give a chance to speak. Jean-Marie, you've had your hand up now for quite a while. Do you want to? Or would you like to ask or say something or contribute something, Jean-Marie?
This is Kazi from Bangladesh. Can I speak?
Yes, Kazi, you can. Please do.
Okay. So actually, I was hearing about the grassroots women's. You know, I am the member of Hero Commission, and we are working with the grassroots women's, those who are who got the training, leadership training, and after getting the leadership training, they are now empowered. And we also provided income generating activities so that they can earn money. In this way, they are now empowered in the community. But after the COVID situation, they had to suffer a lot. But now they just try to overcome the situation. And our experience that they have savings program also. They save money, and during emergency period they use that money. But nowadays, actually, the price is now very rising. Actually, nowadays, actually, the price of foods very expensive. So they are looking for funds now, but it is difficult for getting funds. So I just wanted to know, is there any scope to help them, the grassroots people, how we can help them? Just do you have any idea, or do you have any link about the grassroots women, how we can help them? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kazi. Great question. Anyone have recommendations for Kazi and how her organization in Bangladesh can link up and support the women, additionally beyond what she is already doing, which was quite inspiring? Any suggestions from Beatrice?
Unfortunately, I don't have a suggestion because the African Women's Development Fund's mandate only covers the African continent. And so for the women's rights organization, women-led organizations on this platform, please note that we have just placed out a call for proposal. And so please check our website out. Unfortunately, Mazi, my mandate does not cover your area. Thank you.
Bangladesh, yes.
I think, John, let me just add that I think that's the reason why we are really here. And I think that's the kudos to you and the MCLD for really organizing this, because the question we are all asking is, where is money for grassroots women movements? Where is money? Where is the money for women? And Beatrice here is they are funders, but you can see she's already talking about very limited resources. So where is the money that will fund Beatrice organization, so that Beatrice organization can fund the grassroots? But I want to just suggest what worked for us also. Again, networking is very key. And there is one organization that's called Global Network for Women Peace Builders. Global Network for Women Peace Builders is an organization that actually has the membership on the Grassroots Women Peace Builders, and they're doing excellent work. We are working, they are our partners, and we are doing excellent work, especially in localizing some of these international instruments that have resolutions. And the case here is UN Resolution 1325, localizing and really engaging with the community, women-led grassroots movements to do that. So I think plugging into such organization would help, just to inquire because we also inquired and we ended up getting some leads. In countries, there are embassies. There are international community. I think it does not harm, even just to write an inquiry and even a concept push to them. Look for go an extra mile even to ask for appointment, so that you can pitch and demonstrate the impact that you have in the community and why the funding. Approach the other national donor, other national organizations that are actually being funded by others, if possible. But building a consortium and ensuring that you strengthen the networks and linkages is very key, because out of that, someone will notice there is need for these women, grassroots women to fund. I was almost saying, John, that MCLD is becoming such a force to reckon with when it comes to grassroots organizations, and more so women-led grassroots movements. I think moving forward, they could also keep on writing letters to you, and so that you can go and wave it to the right doors, knocking the right doors with something that is very authentic. I think is okay. Yeah.
Yes. And I am in touch with, I welcome letters, because I am in touch with 3 large women's networks in Bangladesh. There are lots of powerful women in Bangladesh. Yeah.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Okay, Kazi, thank you. Jean-Marie, you've got your mute off now. Do you want to speak?
Allô?
Yes, Jean-Marie, go ahead.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Je suis Jean-Marie de la République démocratique du Congo. Je travaille pour l'organisation, la Fédération des producteurs, la Fédération des organisations de producteurs agricoles, FOPAG Sud Kivu. Je voudrais normalement parler d'une petite expérience dans l'encadrement de femmes, et surtout dans la partie sud, au niveau de la plaine de la Ruzizi, où il y a beaucoup de violations de droits de la femme, jusque même au viol et violences sexuelles. Et là, les femmes se sont décidées de briser le silence en se constituant dans des structures de plaidoyer, dans des structures qui pouvaient les aider à faire entendre leur voix. Et par conséquent, avec l'appui de la FOPAC, on a rapproché les services sanitaires au niveau de la communauté. On a aussi également rapproché les services de sécurité auprès de la communauté. au point que actuellement, on est dans le processus maintenant, les bourreaux répondent à la barre, à leurs actes. Et ils font maintenant concourir maintenant au développement ou au relèvement économique de ces femmes pour normalement, avec l'assistance aussi psychosociale, pour que ces femmes puissent retrouver au moins encore l'espoir de vivre. Et c'est là que nous disons que dans des circonstances très difficiles, vous allez constater que oui, il y a cette structuration, mais souvent, les organisations qui interviennent ne se souviennent pas que vers les fonds, vers les zones non accessibles, il y a des populations, il y a des communautés de femmes qui sont en train de souffrir. Et nous, comme FOPAC, on ne s'intéresse pas beaucoup des femmes qui sont dans des centres, là où il y a la sécurité, là où il y a la paix, mais plutôt on va plus loin dans les villages où il y a des situations ou des contextes là qui ne permettent pas à ce qu'il y ait développement, qui ne permettent pas à ce que les femmes puissent retrouver leurs droits. Et c'est ainsi que je disais que c'est un plaidoyer qui doit être mené pour que ces femmes aussi retrouvent le droit comme toute autre femme. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Jean-Marie. Sarah, Jean-Marie has such nice, slow French. I think I understood, but maybe you could give the gist of his comments, Sarah, on advocacy and their mobilization of women.
Yeah, absolutely. I can summarize what Jean-Marie said. Jean-Marie is from the DRC and he works for FOPAC. And Jean-Marie shared about an experience of women's support in the south of DRC, where women's rights are often violated. And in the example that he shared, women decided to break that silence through advocacy. They really made their voices heard. And with FOPAC, they brought security services closer together and we're working on the psychosocial assistance and other initiatives to support these women. And Jean-Marie emphasized that organizations who do tend to intervene in these ways don't always go to inaccessible regions where women are suffering. And FOPAC focuses on these women far in villages where situations and contexts don't allow for women's rights, and really emphasized how necessary this type of advocacy is.
Wow, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Jean-Marie.
Okay.
Now, Mambu, you have your hand up. I looked at your Facebook page. You have twice as many Facebook friends as anybody I know, so you must be an expert in networking. Do you want to make a comment, Mambu? You're muted, Mambu. I don't know if you want to unmute and speak. Okay, Mambu's not coming through. We're about out of time. I really thank everybody for participating. I know on a big call, it takes a certain amount of boldness to raise your hand and participate, and I really appreciate those who did. And I want to express enormous appreciation for our guests, Beatrice and Celine. Just, I so admire what you both represent from both the peace building side and the funding grassroots women. Certainly, and I appreciate your warm comments about, or maybe it's just the challenge that you offer to MCLD to keep growing in this area and building these networks that can access funding. That's certainly one of, we're doing lots of advocacy with the bilaterals, pushing them in this direction. I'm really, really glad that so many of them are beginning to shift their own policies. So thank you for that. I do want to I'm going to change the screen here a little bit. I'm going to show up a slide with some of the coming events we have coming up. Let me do that. Just a moment. Share screen. Share Chrome tab. Okay, so there's, for those of you who have been active with the movement, you have seen that there is we have a letter that has gone out with under the signatures of more than 1,600 majority world grassroots organizations. And we're organizing a virtual platform for people's comments. We had a call yesterday with many of the signatories on what they see organizers of meetings on locally led development that are happening. And yet it's been very hard for people from the majority world to actually participate. And so, the participants said enough is enough. We want to change this. And so there's a virtual platform and we will send out, you'll find on mcld.org how to access it. There's also a French language listening session on this toolkit for locally led development events, part of that same campaign around those advocacy letters. And then, as was mentioned earlier, there's the UN Commission on the Status of Women that starts on International Women's Day, and is one of its top priorities is finance for women's movements, which is why we wanted to contribute to that global effort. So if you are participating in the CSW, please be in touch with me. Some of us here in the US will be attending, and I know people from around the world are attending. So if you know people who are attending, we'd love to meet in person at the UN as it's going on. So you can just email info@mcld.org. Our next monthly call will again be at the final Wednesday of the month. And then we are going to start our unlearning labs. These are learning opportunities and unlearning opportunities led by experts from the majority world. So you'll be getting more information about that as they get scheduled. So those are our coming events. I'm going to stop sharing and then let me change the gallery view. Okay, so I want to thank all of you for taking time with this. I know I wasn't able to reach everybody who had their hand up today, but I so appreciate everybody for being here. And we have this, for those of you who are new to these calls, we have a tradition in that we all unmute and we all say goodbye together to each other. So if you all want to unmute and you can say goodbye to all of us. My camera.
Bye, bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Bye-bye. Wonderful week.
See you.
Bye-bye.
See you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, bye. Good night.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.